the trouble that it seems like Apple and Google may have gotten themselves into. So Apple and Google have actually removed Fortnite from the iOS and Google Play stores. And this is all, a very orchestrated situation from Epic Games. I'm not sure how you want to
That's
like dice this up.
crazy.
Yeah,
Oh man, this is I love this story in so many ways because it is so obvious how much Epic has planned this that the fact that okay, we'll talk a bit about the timeline events, but the fact that this whole thing they've even got like a short film like a pre-rendered Fortnite cutscene about this. So like they've just this is one of the weirdest things, but it's so interesting in many ways. But maybe we should start from the start.
yeah. So I think, and when you said that, how orchestrated it is, it's 100% orchestrated. So what going back even further, Tim Sweeney, who runs Epic Games, he's very much about driving down the costs for transaction fees or service fees or gateway fees. There's lots of different kind of descriptions on what people, but it's really just a fee to play on a storefront. So you've got Nintendo, you've got PlayStation, Xbox, Apple, Google. They've all got big storefronts, lots of customers, and pretty much standard, it's 30%. Same as on PC even with Steam. So 30% fee. And Tim Sweeney's always been against this. He's hated this because they've always, made engines, made games. So they've always copped the 30% fee. Now, when Fortnite blew up as much as it did and, got that kind of insane amount of cash behind it, literally billions of dollars behind it, they went off and created the whole Epic Game Store just to really compete with Steam. Now, on the iOS side and the Google Play side, it's a massive contributor to Apple and Google. And in gaming in general, like on those storefronts, is huge, much, much bigger than other categories. And especially that, a lot of the currency that's actually going through. So in Fortnite's case with V-Bucks, it's all made up and you get, a skin, but it's from a cost perspective, it's like nothing. So from a profitability perspective, it's so high.
Hmm.
So very strategically Epic, and it was kind of amazing when I watched this happen. They, pushed an update with Fortnite, and they then pushed out this whole idea of a mega drop. So fees across every single platform, so including Nintendo, PlayStation, and PC. There's going to be a cut of 20% on the actual V-Buck cost to get V-Bucks. So whatever it cost you before, it's going to be 20% cheaper. And then on the Google Play Store and the the Apple Store, the App Store, they actually had an alternative way to buy V-Bucks, which is
This
completely
is
against the guidelines. Like, not even against the
it's
guidelines. It's like they have been hard on this historically.
this is crazy because the fact that they just go like I wonder if Apple or Google knew about any of this at all before they pushed that update because just you can just imagine reaction of like the head of the App Store and whatever in at Google and Apple just just being like they did what? It's kind of crazy them putting in basically like a V buck costs whatever 9.99 if you do it this way, but if you do it this way, it costs 7.99. And what, especially when we're talking younger kids, who in their right mind is going to choose the 9.99 option? It's insane. Like everyone's going to go for the 7.99 option.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, I've actually read a lot of, I've gone really deep on this topic because to me, this kind of stuff is super interesting because it's got a business and gaming element. Two things I'm really, really interested in. And, you know, there's been so many examples of Apple pushing back so hard on these things. So even, with Kindle, so if you go the Amazon Kindle, you cannot buy Kindle books on an iPad. So if you're on an iPad, you're in the Kindle app, you can read Kindle books on your Kindle app, but you cannot buy Kindle books. It's not allowed. Because the thing is, Amazon tried to make it so that you could buy it by going via the web, and then Apple blocked it. And they're like, well, okay, we're going to remove the Kindle app. And then Amazon was like, oh, so now the Kindle app actually has this thing that says if you log on to the Kindle store or like Amazon, you can buy the book and it will appear in the app. So They could do the same thing. Fortnite, like Epic. They could actually say, if you want to buy V-Bucks, go to epic.com or go to fortnite.com or whatever and buy it and it will appear in your account. So they could do that. And that's
They could,
following the guidelines.
but we know that's not why they've done this. They,
Well,
they
no, I know.
they're trying to get something changed with this, and whether or not, obviously, we'll talk about it when we haven't got to the point where we're actually there's lawsuits involved yet. But
Yeah, because this
as
is
in like what we're saying, but
yeah, this is all about friction, right? Because whatever you want to say, the App Store and the Google Play Store makes things very seamless. And seamless to a point where it's crazy, where kids are spending thousands of dollars. Like, it's maybe too seamless. So yeah, Epic introduced this update, pushed to all platforms, and then in response, and I can't remember how long it was, but it was felt like within hours, because I remember reading articles saying, Fortnite's pushed this out and it's offering an alternative way to buy in-app purchases, and almost the commentary around it was like, how are they doing this? Isn't this just violating the terms of service? And then the next set of articles that came out were like, Apple has removed Fortnite from the iOS App Store. It's like,
who'd have thunk?
ooh, okay, so it's at least up there as one of the biggest games in the world, really. Because unfortunately, if you count the iOS devices as gaming devices, Fortnite's probably still up there with like GTA 5 as the biggest game, in Minecraft you'd probably say, the biggest games going around. And to remove it, like, wow, okay, that's pretty full on. And they were pretty brief around their position on it, just sort of saying, hey, this violates the App Store guidelines, and the payment feature has not been reviewed or approved by Apple, and so it's been removed. Now, what it means is you can still play it if you have it on your device, and I believe you can still buy V-Bucks, like through Apple, but yeah, you can't get the new update. Like, it's just been removed completely.
Well, I think when you say you can't get the new update, I guess I think this was the latest update, so it's I guess if you hadn't updated your version of Fortnite yet to this version, then you're unable to do that anyway. But it's crazy. Just if this was any other game that obviously not on this scale, this wouldn't have been as much of a story. But the fact that it's one of the biggest games in the world and has been for the last at least 2 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and like these are some giant companies, and obviously Apple, and we'll mention Google soon, but Epic is has Tencent has stock in Epic and things like that. It's kind of like these are some big money makers, and it's almost like I don't know, it's like they're just slapping each other in the face, like challenging each other to take the next move. It's kind of crazy to me.
Well, this whole thing was a huge gamble. And, Tim Sweeney, to his credit, and I know people will hate me for saying that, he's been pretty aggressive in this space and, willing to, put his money where his mouth is and back his theories. So he's taken the Fortnite money and now really, like, it's costing him, like, Epic, and then also really Apple a lot of money, removing it from the App Store, because there's people who will get new iPhones, new iPads. Fortnite's very popular. Like, you won't be able to install it now, and it's a very calculated move, as we called out from the start, because what happened as soon as they banned it, it's essentially, Epic had created a trap for Apple, and once they banned it, they then filed suit in Californian courts, and very not contrived, that's the wrong way to say it, but there is a lot of thought that's gone into what they're doing here. So they've used a New York law firm. They're not a Californian company, Epic. They're, I think, based in Maryland from memory. So they're there, but they've chosen the Californian courts, which is their right to do in the US. That's how the US system works. You're allowed to raise a lawsuit in whatever state you want. They've chosen California on purpose because they have the most robust antitrust laws in the country. And, like, there's a whole host of stuff in this lawsuit. I actually flipped through a lot of it. that
Oh
is just like
wow.
really fascinating. So it's 65 pages long, and then at the same time they released a parody of Apple's very famous Macintosh ad, the 1984 ad, which was challenging IBM, saying, "IBM, Big Blue, you've lost your way. You're a monopoly. You need to like be shaken up, and that's what we're doing." So Tim Sweeney here is trying to create a parallel. Like Epic are the ones who are trying to shake things up
And it looks exactly like the ad.
with Fortnite
And the thing
characters.
with Fortnite characters, and the thing with this is, so I'm just picturing in my head now. I don't know how you submit a lawsuit, especially in the US, right?
Hmm.
Do you physically have to hand documents, or can you submit something online? Do you know?
Oh, it depends. So you file a lawsuit, but it depends on the state. So in Australia, like I can speak to that a bit more. You definitely have to do it in person.
Okay,
And,
so
and
just assuming it's been done in person, what I was getting at was I can just imagine, right? They've got someone in California. They get them, they send them to wherever they need to submit, and they just have them standing in like
yeah,
the foyer with the document, and they're just like, okay, we'll wait, we'll keep refreshing whatever they're refreshing. Oh, they've removed us, and then the person just slams like the
yeah,
paperwork down on the table. And I just imagine like the visual of that is hilarious in my head. Have how they've kind of lined this all up. And if it was done online, then instead the person's sitting there with like the mouse button over the submit button or something like that.
yeah. I don't know. Like usually the US is almost more backwards than other countries, like more old school. I probably should say in a fairer way. So I'd imagine a lot of it
You heard it. You heard it here. USA is backwards.
a lot a
Integral.
lot of the stuff would be still physical. I mean, even the Australian courts only, when they really got pushed with the whole COVID stuff, moved to being online. And same as the Supreme Court in the US, they don't allow. Typically, they didn't allow any audio recording of the Supreme Court in session. The only way you could hear it is you'd have to physically go there to see them and to hear them. And then with the whole COVID situation, they were forced to. And there's some hilarious stuff that happened. There was like one of the justices had obviously gone into the bathroom and not put their mic on their microphone on mute, like when they're in session. So it's just really amazing stuff.
That's a
An
uh,
image,
no, what's the Leslie Nielsen movies?
naked
Naked
gun.
Gun. That's like a
Yeah,
Naked Gun. I think one of them opens up with something similar. But
it is,
I
isn't
just
it?
I think I think Epic missed a chance to take a photo of the documents with like written on in like handwriting hashtag free Fortnite, which is like the hashtag they're pushing. They should have like taken a photo of on their actual the paperwork submitted to the courthouse. That would have been really funny, or wherever they submit it.
And look, like I'm not a lawyer, and then even if you are a lawyer, you have to practice, Californian law, and they've filed it in federal court as well. But just kind of going through and listening to some legal experts into this case. Look, I don't. Number one, do I think that Epic are trying to win this lawsuit against Apple? I think that they know they're not going to win it. I think they probably think it's a 5% chance that they'll win this lawsuit. I think there's an overarching effort that they're trying to do here, which is trying to break up the control that Apple has, and then by extension Google, and we'll get into that soon, on these mobile platforms. Because as opposed to other platforms like PC, where Epic have gone, okay, we don't like the 30% fee that Steam charges. We'll create our own game like storefront, and we'll try to make it really big, and we'll make the fee 12%. It's almost impossible. Well, with Apple, it is impossible. You can't even sideload apps properly. Like they don't work on the device after a period of time. But you go through the lawsuit, and it's so tenuous, man. Like even if you understand, like you don't have to worry about the law so much. Just understand the logic of what they're saying. They're trying to say that in-app purchases are basically just transactions, like transaction fees, like PayPal. Now, do you think of in-app purchases as, oh, that's just like a PayPal fee that you're sending to someone?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Because I've never even thought of it. It's just as a position as a gamer. I just think of it as I am making a purchase. I'm not thinking of anything about the transaction itself.
So
So
do you
I don't
think
know
of
if
it
that
as
answers your
like,
question.
well, but do you think of it as you're paying for something, or do you feel like it's just a payment? Does that make sense? Like I'm
It does
transferring
not.
money to you. Hey?
No, it does not feel like that at all. No.
Yeah. So
It
like,
feels like I am making a purchase. So to me, it
yeah.
does feel like a transaction.
Well, okay. So I'll explain it like this because I'm actually not being clear. So you know, with eBay, and in the old days, eBay and PayPal were the same company, but they're separate now. So you buy something on eBay and you use normally PayPal to pay for it, right? What they're trying to say is the in-app purchase is only the PayPal component of it. Whereas personally, I don't think of it like that. Like if I'm playing a game and then it has some stuff on it and it says, "Hey, if you buy this thing, it removes ads." I view it as, "Oh, okay, that's like the eBay purchase and the PayPal purchase." I'm actually buying something. It's digital, but I'm paying for something. It's not just a payment. It's not like they're facilitating a payment. It's actually I'm buying something, and when I buy something, there's a payment attached to it. Does that
That's
make
what I said.
sense?
It feels like I'm
Yeah.
making a purchase, a
Yeah.
transaction.
The
So
lawsuit, the
for
lawsuit,
something, for something.
yeah. Whereas the lawsuit is trying to say, no, 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 it's just a payment. You're not getting anything. It's just a payment. That's all they do. And I'm like, geez, this isn't gonna hold up. And that's where they're coming from a dollar perspective. They're like, hey, PayPal, they charge like 2.9% and Apple charges 30%. So they're 10 times higher than the market and everything like that. I'm like, this is just, I feel like they have very, very, very little chance, just from a logic perspective of winning this case. And then also just by the fact that they're on, PlayStation Store, Nintendo, and they're also charging 30%. So it's kind of a bit like, why are you attacking Google? It seems, and Apple, it seems a bit weird. But
So we know.
maybe,
So do we know those other platforms are also 30.
yeah, like pretty much it's industry standard.
Okay.
And that's also going to be a really hard thing to prove because the whole antitrust slash monopoly perspective, and this is generally a global perspective, is are you doing harm to the consumer? And I only know this because I work in financial services in Australia, and a lot of people argue it's a monopoly, but the argument's always around, are you doing harm to the consumer? So are you being unfair and unreasonable with your actions? And by the way, that's why Epic has actually like sprung this trap, right? Because they're trying to do something, goat, Apple and Google into doing something that they can argue, hey, they're being unfair. Look at them,
Wait.
wielding
Did you
their
say?
power.
Did you just say goat?
I meant goad. Did I say goat?
Goat. They're
I
trying to
meant
goat.
goad them into doing
Thank you.
that.
No, I just wanted to get an episode title from that. That's all.
And like I want to move on to the Google portion of this. So they did the same thing with Google. I think it took longer for Google to follow suit and remove Fortnite from Google Play, and it didn't get as much airtime, even though there are more Android phones, and in theory, it actually would impact more people. Now, Epic also sued Google, and the lawsuit is different, and I also flicked through that lawsuit. Now, with this lawsuit, I actually think that they have some kind of case in this lawsuit, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to say in this lawsuit, and there's some really cool channels on YouTube. We'll link in the description on the clip show, but they're trying to argue that effectively Google is a little bit like Windows in the 90s. When Windows was forcing users to have Internet Explorer? And then
Yeah.
there was a big antitrust, and the government won against Microsoft in that case. And whether you agree or not with the case, it has become case law in America. Now, in the case with Epic, it's really interesting. There's some stuff that came out in the lawsuit, which was Epic and Tim Sweeney had a deal with the manufacturer OnePlus. I don't know if you know them. They're a fairly large manufacturer.
Not familiar myself, but feel free to explain.
Yeah, well, they're just like one of the largest Android OEMs. They're pretty popular in Australia, but they're massive in Asia. Now, Epic, they actually did a deal with them where they would actually install Epic on the phones by default. So you didn't have to go to the Google Play Store or anything. You just clicked on Epic, and then you can install Fortnite or whatever Epic games were on there. Now, the
Just
interesting,
like iTunes and that U2 album.
Right. But I'm all for that, right? Like if you want to do that, fine. Like I don't want to buy a phone that has Epic on it, but if that's the deal that they want to make, and the thing is, Epic then cuts out Google. So then Epic can make money off all the in-app purchases because they've installed the app directly on the Android device. Now, when Google caught wind of this, they actually went back to OnePlus and said, if you do that, we will terminate your license to have Android as a manufacturer. Now, this is where they're going to get themselves in trouble, I think, Google, because when you're trying to wield your power and you do something like that, and if you're the judge, you go, well, wait a second, like, what have they done? What has OnePlus done in this case? Like, they're trying to offer a benefit to a customer, and you've removed them from offering that benefit by using your power of, you have the control of the license to be able to issue the license. So, like, they're potentially gonna get themselves into a little strife in this one.
It's just interesting they just didn't copy and paste the lawsuit. It is actually slightly different.
There are
I
like
would have just assumed it's the same thing myself, but I'm not
no,
the one that sat there and actually going through it. So
it's a bit different. There's some stuff that's like they're arguing the same stuff that I don't think is gonna fly, which is around, the transaction fees are they're just transaction fees in our purchases. So they're trying to set this whole thing up like as if, one set of things is, the app and then everything else is just payments, not actual transactions, which is just, it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think anyone will let it fly. But yeah. And then there was also a really interesting one where they wrote some stuff about how Epic and Google were entering negotiations about how can you discount this fee, this 30% fee, right? And then Google was like, if you start using our services, we'll let you have discounts on those things, but not the 30%.
it's this whole thing is just, as you said, this I think is going to end up being like almost like a watershed moment. When obviously we don't know how it's all going to go yet, but I think we will see this kind of as the start of something much bigger, and see the ripples, I guess, across all the different platforms for probably for years to come. So
Yeah, and I think that's why I think like this is so critical, and I kind of love this kind of big business stuff. But I look at this and go, you know what? Like we could look back at this, and this will probably take a year or two to actually settle in court. But we might look back and go, oh, actually, this was a huge driver. Because whether this wins or loses, I think it's more the pressure it will put on to, governments and sort of people to look at these markets, and then just the providers themselves to actually just go, you know what, we might need to, address the fees and whether 30% is actually fair or not. Because to me, that does seem exorbitant, especially for the in-app purchases, and very inconsistent because they don't charge these levels of fees for other services. Like if you're
and I
buying,
think
yeah, go on.
no, sorry, finish.
Yeah, no, I was just saying if you're buying like an Amazon movie, they've done a deal with Amazon where they don't charge 30%. I think they charge 10% or something. So they're pretty inconsistent, to be fair, with how this is adjudicated. It's really just that it makes so much money. It's hard for them to say no to it.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the sentiment towards Epic plays out as well, because we know that Epic Games Store had a ton of negative, I guess, PR and online reputation regarding when they started announcing all the, it's been a while now, but all the exclusives coming to the Epic Games Store. Oh, the anti-consumer and everything.
Mm.
The fact, we're going to talk about Control a bit later. That was an Epic Games Store exclusive, and I wonder if I've already seen a lot of that sentiment be in Epic's favor, because they're taking it to the big corporates, which is ridiculous because Epic is also a big corporate at this point. But it's going to be interesting to see if that actually ends up playing out in a very positive way for them and almost rebuilds that reputation in, I guess, those circles. Now, I always thought that was ridiculous because it's just a platform, just like Steam is a platform. But there were some legitimate gripes people had with Epic Games Store. But it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out as well, just the perception of Epic.
No, I totally agree. It's going to be, this is one to watch. It's going to play out over a long period of time.